Come on. Where they at? Do we win? Yes! Hey, what's up everyone? Danny here. This is the next budget build video, and it's actually a build that I did for a friend of mine back in October of last year. And it's taken me a really long time to complete this video because a lot of stuff have come up since then, and it's kind of just been on the back burner. I always record footage for all my builds, but I don't always make videos out of them. Sometimes it just ends up being like a picture that I put on Twitter, and then that's about it. But I always wanted to return to making a video on this particular build because it was more of a unique situation than the previous builds I've done. And that's because it was for a friend that does not live in state. So what I had to do was source all the parts and then assemble it myself so that I could test it for performance and stability. Just because with used parts, I wouldn't want to send him something that was not reliable. So after I did that and made sure it was good to go, I packed it all up and then shipped it to him so that all he had to do was open up the box, plug everything in, and the OS was already installed with some of his favorite games preloaded. And also what made this build unique was the graphics card that I decided to use in it. It's not too common of a graphics card, and some people have never even heard of it. So I thought it would be something interesting to share with you guys on the channel. But alright, enough talking, let's see what I put in the build. These are all the parts that I used in the build. As always, I'll go over the thoughts behind the purchasing decisions as well as the prices that I paid. Also, because this build is a little bit older, at the end of the video I'll talk about some updated prices that you can expect to pay that's more relevant to when this video is being released, so Q1, Q2 of 2017. But onto the parts. The CPU, motherboard, and cooler were bought as a combo from Craigslist for $90. Price-wise, it breaks down to something like this. $45 for the CPU, $40 for the motherboard, and $5 for the cooler. The CPU is the Sandy Bridge i5-2400. This came out in 2011 sporting 4 cores and 4 threads with a base clock of 3.1 GHz and 3.4 GHz turbo. It's from an older platform, but I've used this chip before and I paired it with some pretty powerful graphics cards and the bottlenecking was minimal. Once your budget starts getting a little bit bigger and you start using beefier graphics cards, you'll start to see more bottlenecking, but for the lower price systems, this is still a great option. I used a stock heatsink because we're not going to be overclocking the CPU and it works really well for stock settings. It runs pretty quiet, like way quieter than any of AMD's stock coolers before the Wraith cooler came along. The motherboard is an MSI P67A G45. It's kind of crazy that this is valued at around the same price of a Haswell or Skylake entry-level motherboard, and this is due to motherboards being more delicate and fragile than GPUs. So over time they become rarer and rarer because they are out of production and the existing ones continue to slowly fail and die off, whereas their CPU counterparts continue to thrive since they're much more resilient and durable. For the RAM, I went with a mixed set of 4GB 1600MHz G-Skill Ripjaws and 4GB of 1333MHz ADATA. I don't even know what model these are, they're just generic ugly RAM, and it totals up to 8GB. I got these for $15 a pair on Craigslist, so $30 in total for an 8GB kit. It's a little bit more than I'd like to pay since I found 8GB kits for $20 in the past before, but with the crazy RAM prices as of recent, I'll happily take them for $30. $60 for 8GB? Around this time last year, you were able to get 8GB kits for less than like $25, and that was brand new, no rebate. And for those of you wondering, mixing and matching brands, frequencies, and timing is for the most part okay. You just can't mix RAM types like DDR3 with DDR2 or DDR4. You'll just lose out on the better RAM's performance just a tiny bit, as everything is going to be matched to the slower module. Motherboards typically can do this automatically, and if you do run into problems, you can usually manually match them in the BIOS. For the graphics card, I used the GTX 760 Ti. This is the card that you rarely will ever hear about, and you may have stumbled upon it when you went to download a GTX 7 series driver, but most likely you paid no mind to it. This card is essentially a GTX 670 rebrand. It was only used for OEM systems. This cost $90, and looking back it was a little bit high, but it was priced accordingly at the time compared to the GTX 760s and 770s, which were around $80 and $100 respectively. For the power supply, I used a Seasonic SS600 ET that I got from eBay for $24.95. It's essentially a new open box unit because it was part of a brand new pre-built PC and it was pulled to be sold. I really like this unit because it's 80 plus bronze from a reputable company, it has plenty of power, and it just comes in at a low price. I don't really have anything bad to say about this except that the cables are really ugly, but that's kind of expected since it's an OEM unit. For storage, I went with a solid state drive and mechanical hard drive combination. The solid state drive was bought on hardware swap for $25 and is a 128GB OEM Toshiba unit that was pulled from a brand new working laptop. The hard drive was a used 500GB 7200 RPM Seagate Barracuda that I got on Craigslist for $20. For this build, I opted out of the nowadays kind of standard 1TB minimum in lieu of much quicker boot times and load times for the select programs that will be on the SSD. And last but not least, the case. There is no case, and that's because I was shipping this to my friend and it wouldn't have been cost efficient to do so with a case. The cost for me as a regular person shipping a computer inside a case fully built would be in the ballpark of around $50, if not more, especially if you consider insurance. Whereas Newegg is a big company that ships stuff out all the time, so they can offer free to low cost shipping on almost all the cases they sell. So what I told him to do was to buy a case for himself to save the money, and then I will ship him the parts so that he can put it all together himself. But to make the price more realistic so that this isn't clickbait, we'll put in $20 for the case, as that's the typical sale price that I see all the time. With $20 you can pretty easily get yourself an entry-level case that'll get the job done. For the operating system, I'm not going to factor in the cost because they can just use Windows 10 unactivated, which I'm actually planning on doing a detailed tutorial for sometime in the future since I've had a lot of questions on how that works and how to do it. So the grand total comes out to $299.95, but we'll just round it up to an even $300. So this next part of the video is usually where I show footage of me assembling everything inside the case, but since there was no case, it was just me putting everything on top of a wooden board. Seriously, that was it. I just had this particle board and just laid everything kind of scattered around and then tested it as is. So it was like a ghetto test bench. For the benchmarks, I ran the typical suite of synthetic benchmarks as well as a couple of games. Overwatch, because that was the main game that my friend wanted to play, as well as Grand Theft Auto because it's a pretty heavily loaded game in terms of stressing both the CPU and GPU. And I find that if you can run that pretty well on good settings, then you're pretty much set for a lot of other games. But sit back, relax, and enjoy the benchmarks. So those were the benchmarks. Now let's talk about up-to-date prices. Now a lot of these components are still going to be the same price today. The two major things that have seen a price drop since then would be the CPU and mobile combo and the graphics card. With the release of the Pentium G4560 and Ryzen literally weeks away, the value of the i5-2400 is going to be a bit lower than what I paid for this build. I'd expect it to be around $70 for the combo. The price is dropping, but it's not going to completely plummet since it's still a really good chip, even being 6 years old. As for the 760 Ti, you're probably not going to find one in your area since it's such a rare card, but something that's close to the performance like the GTX 760, 770, or even the AMD 7950, 7970, like an R9 280, those all have dropped in prices since I made this video, and you can probably find one for around $60 to $80 depending on how good of a deal you can find, and depending on which card you decide to go with. So that puts this build at around $250 to $270 in Q1, Q2, 2017. Let me know down in the comment section below if you would consider buying this build for around $250 to $270, the updated price, or even if you would consider buying it for $300, even though it's like an outdated price, since it still performs pretty well. Or would you rather spend a little bit more, like $350 to $400, on a newer Kaby Lake, Pentium G4560 build so that you have a better upgrade path. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. And in terms of announcements, next week's video is actually going to be me detailing the process of packing all this up and shipping it to my friends. So that's going to be a fun video. But yeah, other than that, I will see you guys in the comment section down below. I keep on looking over here because of the foam. It's very distracting with all the bumps and waves. But yeah, I'll see you in the comment section down below as well as in the next video. Bye.